Hello, this is Corey. Before we get started, I want to share with you a new thing I'm doing for the Cincinnati business leaders. In January of this year, I launched the Prioritize Leader Academy and brought together 8 different business leaders and owners. And we meet once a month as well as have coaching in between our different sessions. So basically it's a mastermind, but we've added strong content, incorporated faith into the piece. And so it has gone so well that in October, we are launching our second cohort. So if you are a business leader or a business owner and you are looking for community, you are looking for coaching, you are looking for additional content to help push you forward, then reach out. Love to give you more information on what this looks like. You can email me at corey@coreymcarlson.com or go ahead and give me a call, 720-301-8377. And this is for any Cincinnati business owner or leader who is looking to grow over this next 12-month period. Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. I'm your host, Corey Carlson. This podcast is where we talk about how successful business leaders win, not only at work, but also at home. On this podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with great leaders to hear stories of how they win. Thank you for listening, and on to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey. Today's episode with Cherylanne is filled with wisdom. She is an executive coach for females, and I've had a couple conversations with her over the years to learn from her, as well as to share some knowledge. And today on the podcast was great as we do a deep dive into listening and how she asks some additional questions to the clients or to her kids to buy time to help her think through what a possible response could be. We talk about the importance of some schedule planning with family, and she shares some of the tips that they use. She talks about how she makes decisions and this idea of return of effort and how that's been impactful over her career, both at P&G, but especially now as she leads a business of coaching individuals. We also talk about really the power of fear it can have on our lives and how to push through it. It's a great episode packed with lots of good information. Hope you enjoy it as much as I did. On to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey Carlson. You're listening to the Win at Home First podcast. Today I'm joined by Cherylanne Skolnicki, who is a executive coach here in the Cincinnati area. And I'm actually grateful for her because I met with her a little over a year and a half ago, and she was just so generous with her time and her knowledge to help me get my coaching, business going, because she has been doing it for a while and has lots of just great content and just activity that she's doing. So she's leading a business. She's married. She has 3 kids and is winning at home and work. So that would be a perfect guest to have so I could ask questions to see how to get better for the listeners and myself. Thank you for being on the show today, Cherylanne.
Thank you for having me.
So what is that key trait for leaders to win at work and at home?
So the first word that comes to mind is listening, an ability to be a good listener. And I am not sure I would claim to be the best listener on the planet, if I'm being perfectly honest. But when I'm at my best, I think I'm pulling context out of situations by being a good listener. Sometimes it's so easy to get reactive to the first statement, the facial expression, the action that's taken, the email that gets sent. And when I'm pausing enough to get context through listening, kind of get the rest of the story, I think that's what elevates my leadership.
All right. So I got to dive deeper on that one already because like you, I have 3 kids and we tend to move fast. Sometimes getting context takes time.
Yes.
So how do you slow down and take the context out, whether you're talking to your husband, your kids?
Yes. Well, let's state for the record that if you ask my children if I am a good leader, they would probably all say no. So, I don't know about they're the best people to ask. Let's see. The practice that I have had to train myself in is noticing, I'll call it my physiological response. If I'm having a physiological response to what you just said, I once heard someone say, if it's hysterical, it's historical, right? If I'm triggered in some way by what you've just said, I've learned to sort of tap the brakes before I open my mouth. Am I perfect at this? No. Okay. But when I'm at my best, I feel that physiological response. It could be my heart rate goes up, a little bit of heat rises, I'm getting hot, like agitated by what you've said. I want to come right back with a quick response. Because if you and I are going to go to verbal war, Corey, I'm going to win. Like, it is my favorite game to play. I'm very practiced in it. Ask my husband. So I've had to really train myself to say, listen, you don't want to get into verbal sparring on this, right? Because then I get competitive and I want to come back at you. And then there's hurtful things said that I can't take back. So at home, especially, wow, what did you mean by that? Hey, tell me what's going on there. Give me the rest of the story. Phrases where I can sort of use that time to get my own physiological response back in my body. I learned this year, this is new knowledge for me, that an emotion lasts 90 seconds. Like, the true physiological response to an emotion lasts about 90 seconds. If you can ride out that 90 seconds, you have a prayer of having a measured, thoughtful response instead of one that's driven by your biology.
So by asking some of those questions, you're literally buying time.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me what you mean by that. And it's all in the tone so you go, well, what exactly do you mean? That's not going to get us anywhere, right? But when something gets said or asserted and I can say, pause, tell me what you mean by that. Or, hey, what's going on there? It doesn't sound like you, right? Or why are you asking? Or do you need a little space? And it depends on which child I'm talking to, or if it's my spouse, sort of exactly how I would use that.
I like that. And it's interesting because we're both coaches, but when I'm with clients, man, it's crazy how my posture is so good to listen because I'm there, I pen in hand, I'm ready, and I'm asking a lot of those questions. But man, at home, I want to provide the solution so fast. Mm-hmm. And how have you, this is a very selfish question, but I know everyone listening are also leaders. They may not be coaches, but they're leaders. I like to provide solutions or really help be a coach, but sometimes I need to be put on my father hat or my husband hat. So when you're at home, how do you put on the wife or the mother hat and kind of take that coach one off who has all the answers?
Yeah, it's so hard. So my oldest child is 16. She'll be 17 in a couple months as we record this. And then I have a 14-year-old son in the middle and then an 11-year-old daughter. So just for context for the listener, the question I am using with them that allows me to stay out of the coach realm and get into a parent realm is, how would you like to handle that? So think about the scenario. I think what I'm hearing you say, Corey, is like, if they come to me and they have a problem, like, I'm so stressed about this, or this thing is happening and I'm frustrated about it, or I'm mad about it, or I don't know what to do. Anytime they say, I don't know what to do, my antenna go up. I'm like, ooh, I do. Let me give you an answer. But I've learned to say, how do you want to handle that? Because what it does is it puts them back in agency of problem solving, right? They sort of move from the emotional to the logical because you can't solve a problem out of emotion. So your question like snaps that into gear. So sometimes they'll say, I have no idea, right? And sometimes they'll say, well, I think this is what I want to do. Okay, great. Sounds like a plan. And you have them sort of back in their logic-minded self. And it's healthy because you also hear how they're choosing to solve the problem. And then if you need to steer or, provide an alternative or say, maybe this is another thing to think about, at least they're on a ground where they've started thinking about how they want to handle it. So with kids those ages, I'm really in that journey of I want them to be great problem solvers. And so I have to give them space to at least ideate solutions instead of fixing every single thing for them when they bring it up.
Yeah, I like that question. There's been times I even said, well, what role do you want me to play? What hat do you want me to have? Is it the coach hat or is it the dad hat?
Yes.
And it's amazing. They so often say the dad hat.
I have to do that with schoolwork. So, if they say, hey, will you read this? I wrote this essay or I wrote this piece for the newspaper or whatever. I've learned to stop and say, do you want input or praise? Because 90% of the time, what do they want? They want you to tell them it's fantastic. Right. So if they're not looking for input there, they're really just looking for yes, look at that. You did it. Great. You need to tell me because I am a continuous improver and I will give you feedback just to get it that last 1%, if you don't caution me not to do it.
So in your house, you guys are busy, 3 teenagers or the third one's almost a teenager. But what does it look like in your guys' house for date night and that rhythm that you and John have to make sure that he's got a full-time job? It's very demanding for him. Your job's demanding. So what are you guys doing from a marriage standpoint to find your guys' time?
Yeah, it's very challenging, right? I thought this chapter was going to be easy street around like, look at all this time we're going to have. And then we got hit with COVID right when ostensibly our life should have been opening up with the oldest able to stay with the youngest. I mean, we couldn't leave the house. And then as we got back from that, it's like, does she have a driver's license? No, big delay on that, right? So I think we're just feeling like we're climbing out. The thing that works for us in terms of time alone is truly sometimes right in our own house. We have a great outdoor space. I love to be on it. It's a very private backyard. And being able to just go out and have one drink or one conversation or one cup of coffee on a Saturday morning is very effective for us. So I would be lying if I was like, we're great at going out and having all kinds of date nights. I really feel like our world is just reopening. We went to the Billy Joel concert a couple of weeks ago in Cincinnati. It's kind of a big deal in Cincinnati. We had those tickets for 2 years before we finally got to go because the show was rescheduled with COVID. And we were looking at each other saying, it's really the first like big thing we've done in quite some time. So it felt great to be back out doing something really, like sort of a memory being made. But a lot of the time in the last year and a half has been closer to home, trying to really stay focused on conversation. My husband is much better at having fun than I am, like 10x better. He is much funnier. He is much more aware of pop culture and things happening around us than I am. I'm like so nerdy. It's sad. And so he really drives that. He makes sure that things stay light and that we're able to get some time away from like the running of the household, the raising of the family, and being in our careers.
Like I mentioned, not just date nights, but it's any time throughout the week that we can just get that one-on-one time, whether it's coffee. I think that is some of a miss, and I'm a big proponent of date night. I talk about it a lot, but I think some people get so confused. It's got to be this big deal. It's got to be this big 4-hour thing. It's going to cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars because we got to go eat here. And instead, and this even happens with spending time with kids, we want to make something so big that we keep delaying it. Oh, well, we'll do that next month. We'll do that next month. Sometimes it's just coffee. It's just hopping in the car together and going and getting ice cream, or it's going in and doing something. And so I like how that simplicity has became a standard practice in your guys' house.
I think if I put a positive frame around it, sometimes I'm hard on myself about this tendency, but if I put a positive frame around it, it's what enables frequency. Right. So that fabric of our lives where I call it eye to eye time, like I am looking at you having a face-to-face conversation. So much of the time we spend as a couple can be sort of side by side, right? Where we're swirling around the kitchen doing things, or we're next to each other in the front seat of the car, driving people somewhere, but you're not actually like looking each other in the eye, having a conversation. There's depth to that experience that I think is what people get out of date night. Right? You want to be sitting across the table at dinner or wherever you are. So that can be replicated, to your point, in simpler, more frequent ways. And if I look underneath, like what makes it meaningful, that's what it is. It's having your undivided attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the eye to eye, side to side. I even heard back to back is another one where we're just fighting. It's just a war. And but and then Luke talking about kids with the eye to eye, side to side. Man, there's some power in that side to side with kids because you're driving and they don't have that heavy parent pressure of your eyes on them. They can kind of say what you want. So I think some of the most great conversations we've had with our kids, or I've had with my kids, is driving them to practices.
Agree.
So for us, it's making sure I'm not on the phone for work. I'm not listening to a work podcast. I don't allow them to have AirPods in their ears when we're driving because I want that time.
Sure.
I want that time to talk. And I'm sure you're pretty darn intentional with your time with your kids as well.
I am. I think the side by side time is totally the opposite with kids. So it's actually more powerful because you take that vulnerability element away, where there's the authority figure sort of looking them in the eye. And it's hard to say some things in the sort of intensity of that experience. So I think it's an interesting point that it's different with your spouse than with your kids.
Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you are enjoying it so far. Before we go back to the rest of this episode, I wanted to share with you my book, Win at Home First. Some of you have read it, so thank you very much. For others of you, you have not. And I encourage, if you're looking for a resource to help you with these times of your work is now in your home and your home is now in your work and what this looks like, this book is being helpful to many leaders like you. Forbes magazine said it was one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. And the book is broken up into 4 different sections to help you. First is about you, understand who you are. The second is marriage and ideas and tips to help with your marriage. Third is parenting. And the last is work. So these 4 different sections to help you recalibrate during this time and to help move forward. So if you are needing additional resources, I encourage you to check out my book, Win at Home First. It is available on Amazon as well as Audible. And so on to the rest of the episode. Thank you very much. Shifting a little bit into work as you think about, as you lead your company, loneliness is a popular term right now, right? Leadership is lonely at the top. We hear all these different phrases. You run your company. You've got, a great team. They all like you and things go well. But at the same time, you're the boss. You can fire people. You can hold people accountable for not doing a particular task the way you want it done. And then you go home and you're the mom. You're obviously the wife. And so how do you navigate kind of this loneliness with finding your time to find, whether it's your tribe, whether it's engaged with your employees? What does that look like?
Yeah. It's something I've thought about a lot as I left sort of the comfort of a corporate nest. I spent 15 years working in corporate America, marketing jobs. I always had a peer group. I always had somebody above me and below me. Like you're sort of nested in pretty securely with built-in peers to collaborate and commiserate with, candidly, right? And then you get into entrepreneurship, and my experience has been, I tried to recreate that. I have a strong desire to have that with the women on my team. But to your point, it's not the same. Like they're very clear that there's something a little bit different about they can have that with each other, but they can't have it in exactly the same way with me. And it is very easy to internalize that as isolating. I would argue I have a great experience with our clients. I coach exclusively women by choice, and we have amazing clients who are in group programs and one-on-one programs and our elite program. I love them, but I am also their coach, not their friend. So it feels great. And I love knowing their stories. And then it's a little more one-sided. So I have to be extra conscious of where I'm building a true peer group. I've done it in different ways at different times, but I really do have a pretty tight, inner circle, a core group of women that I trust, a couple men who I really trust, who have earned that relationship by doing life with me for a long time. Right. And they're people that I know I can be fully myself with, people who I can talk to when I'm on top as well as when I'm on the bottom, right? When there's a struggle happening and I need support, I know I can talk to those people. But it's a small group. And I think sometimes we think it needs to be really large, it's like a leftover from high school or something. You got to roll deep with this big pack. And I don't think that's how it works. I think a little bit the older you get, the tight circle who really knows you with great depth is very reassuring to me that they're there. And I don't need a giant group of people to have that relationship with.
I love that to carry over from high school. This quote I found when I was writing the book was the fact that no one ever talks about Jesus' greatest miracle. And it's the fact that he had 3 close friends in his 30s. And it's so true because we think we need to have a big pack, but it's not about quantity. It's about the quality and the depth that we get to go have of friends. And there's different orbits, right? There, in the Jesus example, there's 3 that he had an orbit with that he was very close with. Then there's another orbit of 12, which we all know the disciples.
Yep.
And then there's an orbit of 72 that's documented where he sends out the 72. And then obviously now we get bigger orbits. And so I think it's a lot in our life. Are those numbers exact? No, we don't have those exact, but have some orbits like that where we've got some people super close to us where we can talk to them when we are in the peaks or in the valleys.
Yes. And I think that your point about Jesus' greatest miracle, which I love that, is 3 is a lot. if you have three people that you've been able to run the test of time with and they've held up and you've held up for them, and there's still that ability to sort of pick it right back up and jump into whatever the current situation is, like that's precious and really important. Now, I also think inherent in your question about the loneliness, sort of from a business standpoint, is they don't all understand the business that I run or what I do. So I don't know that I think I am comfortable at this point with different people playing different roles. Not everyone in that really core group for me, would I say, fully understand some of the challenges or decisions that I'm making as an entrepreneur. And I think it's taken a little bit to find just one or two people who I can sort of call on when I need counsel about the business specifically.
And I guess including friends as well. Do you have a cadence where you are spending time with friends, where it's a girls' trip or girls' night out, or go meet with mentors? Or, do you have some cadence that you're doing in that orbit where it's just not, hey, here I'm working 8 to 5, roughly, and then I'm going home and I'm spouse and mom?
Yeah, I'm going to be really honest about this because I think your listeners deserve that. This is the area of my life that I have chosen to deprioritize so that I had the space I wanted for my work and for my family. So I have a little bit of regret about that. Like there's a little bit of, I think I could have done that better. And I'm constantly like tweaking and adjusting those dials. But if I look back at especially the era that started, let's say 12 years ago, when I left my corporate life, started my business, and I was having my third child, my parents had moved close to us so that my mom was our primary nanny. And, my dad was in like our daily life, like they're still in our daily life. I have a great husband, and then I have these 3 kids. And between that and doing my business life the way I wanted, that gets most of my time and energy. And I would add to that, for me, taking care of myself, like my physical health and well-being, my spiritual health, my emotional health, like those things have been very important to me. And so they get some time, and I do some of that alone. Like time alone is, I always say, like, I'm an outgoing introvert. Like I'm like, I need a lot of time alone to sort of process things and to think. So the thing that didn't fit as well as it does for some of my friends and some of the women in circles I run around with is that girls' night out or girls' trips or time with those people. So I tend to take it where I can get it versus being really intentional about the mechanism. I might walk with some friends. I spend time on the phone with them. We do Voxer messages back and forth, or like a voice texting app, but it's not as regular as I think it is for some people. And honestly, I'm probably paying a little bit of a price for it at this point in my life because it does take time. So I'm hopeful that as the demands of parenting ease a little bit, that's a place I can pour more energy into.
No, well, thanks for the honest answer. Yeah, I know for me, that's actually part of my story. I was trying to be super employee when I was president of sales, traveling every week, and then come home, be super husband, super dad. And there's a moment where I just was like, I don't have any friends because I've let that go. I actually had to recalibrate because I was finding that I was getting that loneliness. My cup was becoming empty. So that's when I became intentional, found some guys, did a small group. And now we got a few annual things that we do. But because I needed it, because I let it go too far, and didn't recalibrate quick enough. So now it's good that you're aware of, hey, these dials may need a little tweaking here.
Well, and it's always important to me to be honest. Look, I run a company called Brilliant Balance. So people can sometimes put my life on a pedestal and think like she has every single thing figured out. Look, I'm sure she has hours allocated to everything perfectly. And that's just not the full truth. So I think I've always, within our community, try to be really honest about no one is doing every single thing. Like we're all trying to kind of optimize various areas. And I lean pretty hard into family. So it at the expense of some other things. That's just the truth.
Right. Well, and brilliant balance doesn't mean everything's balanced perfectly. Like you said, I know I will get with the book title "Went Home First," where it's home must be perfect. No, it's not.
Right.
We have our arguments, and Holly and I can get in our disagreements. So, but it's just knowing to recalibrate, and maybe what happened yesterday doesn't define today. It's just completely moving forward. Another piece I want to talk to you about is really ambition. I mean, you mentioned it early on, if there's a competition, you want to win it. And so with ambition, how do you just kind of control the amount of what you're going after? It's, you've done live events, you have a podcast, and it's you got some great coaching programs. Let's go have more coaching programs. How do you balance with growing at a healthy, steady versus let's just go crazy and coach every single woman out there?
Well, I would probably love to coach every single woman out there. I think this one gets taken care of for me. And it really comes down to what are sort of like what I was just saying about how I think about where my time goes and how friendship sort of took a back seat. I had to make a conscious decision about how much time I was willing to give my work. So this is countercultural, right? For typically, I think left to our own devices, the culture in America is like, you put your work at the center of your life. It gets as much space as it wants, and you squeeze all the rest of your life into like the edges, right? So work is this big giant thing at the center. You're like squeezing your family, and maybe I can have dinner every now and then, and I'll work out, once every 2 weeks or whatever around the edges. Around the time that I left my corporate life, I intentionally decided to flip that on its head and say, okay, what are the elements of my life outside of work that are non-negotiable and really important to me? And then I am going to back into how much time is left for work. And then I'm going to get real hardcore about what is essential in that work. So I'm looking at return on effort, right? What are the activities inside of my work that deliver the highest return? And how do I let everything else go to other people or not get done at all? Okay. So for example, I made a decision because of that framework, to build a team. Why do I have a team? I could be more profitable if I didn't have a team. Probably I could keep more money for myself. Well, because I don't want to do all of that work. Like there's a desire to say this work needs to be done to run a business of this size. But if I engage other people to do that work, then I can keep my work in the size box I'm comfortable having it take up. Right. So that's one mechanism to get the result. I can just choose not to. I would love to have a book. I don't have a book yet because it keeps not making the cut. It keeps being, and my team is in a different place on this. They would love for me to write the book, but I keep pushing it down on the list saying it doesn't have the highest return on effort yet. Haven't hit that place. There are things that back to friendships, like they didn't fit, right? So the work choices get made inside of a size vessel that remains after all the other pieces of my life are attended to. Things like sleep. 8 hours of sleep is non-negotiable for me. And I was not always that way, Corey. Like that's a relatively new development, game changer for me. Like I am a boss on 8 hours of sleep, and you do not want to meet me on 5. Like I am an entirely different human. Exercise, it's non-negotiable. Like 7 days a week, I'm going to move my body in some way. And that's my time. Time alone, non-negotiable. Family dinner. I love to cook. I want to make dinner for these kids. Time emotionally supporting my children, where if they want to have a conversation with me, they get to do that. I want those evenings for them, and not to be, oh yeah, I'll take a bunch of evening meetings and, travel a bunch. Like, so I've really shaped the work to fit inside a vessel that's comfortable for me. And it comes with trade-offs. So I think it bridles my ambition because I'm at peace with those trade-offs.
What would you say, knowing what you know now, to that listener who maybe is in that old place you were of like P&G?
Yeah.
And how would you, what would you tell yourself now, kind of knowing, hey, because there's a little bit of this, they have to work a certain amount of hours. It's a lot of FaceTime still in kind of corporate America. Their schedules are controlled for them.
Yes.
I know you and I both can provide tips and ways not to have other people control your schedule. But big picture, what would you say to that listener who feels they don't have as much freedom in their schedule like maybe you and I do, even though that's debatable at times?
Yeah. I have a lot to say about this. Like I could go on about this for a while, honestly, and maybe some other day we do. But what I wish I had known was how motivated my behavior was by fear. Like I wish I had sort of gotten a hold of myself to understand that what was driving my behavior around, yes, I'll say yes to every meeting that lands on my calendar and yes to every project and yes to every deadline, and was fear that if I didn't do it, I wasn't going to get the rating I wanted, or I wasn't going to get the promotion as fast as I wanted, or someone else was going to get ahead of me, right? I was living in a very competitive culture, and P&G is not the only company like that. Virtually every company is like that. But there was a definite governance by fear of, and no one else was inflicting it upon me. It was, I was creating it for myself. So I wish I had understood, like, with courage, what boundaries could I have reset? And let me tell you how that started to change. When I went back to work after my first child, well, first thing I did was I took a year-long maternity leave, which was available, but relatively unprecedented. So the company had it as a policy. It wasn't like they had to invent it for me. I actually knew one other person who had done it, which was very important because honestly, had I not known her, I don't think I would have had the courage to do it. So I took that year off. And when I went back, I asked if I could work less than full time. And the caveat was I really wanted a delivery job, meaning I wanted P&L responsibility in my role. And that was pretty much like not going to happen. Like that was the line. If you wanted a less than full-time job, you could take a functional role, but not really a P&L role. And I got one. So I came back at 80% in this functional role. It was the first time I felt like I'd sort of asserted that courage to draw a boundary. And then I proceeded to screw it up royally. Because while it was so easy for them to say, yes, you can work 80%, they didn't have to figure out at all what was I going to say yes and no to make that viable, right? So they could look like the guy who hired me could look like a total hero. Yes, I hired this woman at 80%. But who had to figure out which meetings to say yes and no to and how I was going to get these projects, because like the work really didn't downsize. So then I did it. Then I did it again. Then I got a $1 billion brand and worked less than full time. And by then I had learned a thing or two about how I was actually going to navigate this and what was I saying yes and no to, and how did I put up some tighter boundaries. But that's kind of where I started building that courage muscle, was right inside my corporate life. Like, these policies existed. The roles were given. I had the opportunity but I wasn't, it was my own fear around how do I exert some control. Okay. And then it just translates out once I was an entrepreneur. It's like, same thing. I don't take clients. I don't take evening calls. I don't take weekend calls. And many, many coaches are like, well, if you're going to coach these very busy working professionals, they work all day. Don't you have to take the calls in the evening? I'm like, no, this is how we do it. You create time during your workday to have our call, or I can't be your coach. It's just the rules, right? And so like that word courage keeps coming up, right? Because so much of this is about push the fear aside, take the courageous action. Because guess what, Corey? If we let the fear govern, anyone listening, if you let the fear govern, you're going to end up with a life you don't want out of fear. Like, why do we keep chasing those things? It's just, if our courageous action is met with resistance, it means we're not in the right place. And that's how I think God nudges my life along, is you just pay attention to that. You go, oh, I'm going to keep moving in a place that feels like it has flow and it fits. And this is where I belong. And that's like how I get my clues about what's the next move.
It's a great answer. Fear a lot can be that, hey, if you don't work hard enough, you'll lose your job or you won't get the promotion, all those pieces. And there's a heaviness when you and your spouse both work. Mm-hmm. Right? And so how does that look like in your guys' life with you and John of, he's got a demanding job, you've got a demanding job, who has to go pick the kids up and when, and how do you prioritize each other's work? What does that look like in your marriage? Because I know there's a lot of listeners, they both work.
Yeah. Well, John and I have been married it will be 21 years in November. So we have a long marriage, a lot of time to figure some of this stuff out. But one thing I think actually started right at the beginning. I use a phrase a lot in coaching: begin as you mean to go on. Okay. It is very hard to change things midstream. So if someone's starting a new job, for me, the context might be, okay, don't go in there and work 80 hours a week and think you're going to pull the needle out later. Like, begin as you mean to go on, because it's so much harder to change midstream. Okay. So in our marriage, we knew who we were marrying. it was not a surprise. We met in business school. I was already sort of dutifully climbing that corporate ladder. We moved to Cincinnati for my job. He followed, found a new job. Like, we were both going to work. And that was pretty clear from day one that work mattered to me and my career was going to be pretty important. So because of that, we started making choices early on about how do you navigate, like, who does what. And then as we started a family, same situation. Like, I think if you're going to have two working parents and you're going to raise children in 2021, there are some really important conversations about how are we as a couple going to navigate that. And I've learned through coaching other women, like, not everybody does this in the same way because the two humans are different, right? In all the pictures. So in our household, I run the master plan. And I know every week sort of where does everyone need to be? What are all of the activities that we're managing together? What are the projects that need to get done? And we have a meeting about it. And it's not like a formal meeting, but it's one of these patio conversations where we sit down and look at what can you handle based on your schedule? What can I handle based on mine? We're blessed that my parents are close by and they can help with some of those things as well. And we both try to end our workday at a reasonable hour so that we have those evenings with our kids. It's ebbed and flowed over the years as, if I was traveling a lot or he was traveling a lot. There was a period of time he was working in another city, but living here and, was gone 4 days a week. So it's ebbed and flowed over these years. But the season we're in right now is very equal around driving kids to things and, being a part of those activities or science fair projects or whatever. But I do think every household has somebody with the master plan. And in my household, that's me. And it works for us that he's super happy to execute, but doesn't want to keep track of all of it.
Absolutely. What is your cadence on having this scheduled meeting where you talk weekly?
I do a weekly plan. It's something I teach our clients to do because I think I have no idea how I would live without it. I do a plan once a week around all of the after school activities and transportation needs. And then we essentially build a master schedule with everyone who's going to be involved. And then we don't have to talk about it again. The only time we have to talk about it is if there's a change, like a practice moves or a game moves or something. Other than that, everybody's got their marching orders. Don't talk to me about it again because I'm into my work by then. I call it the taxi schedule. Like, that piece of the plan, I call the taxi schedule because they all need to be transported, right? That's a thing that's really intense. And then in that same meeting, we can also talk about, hey, did this come up with you with this kid? Because it came up with me and I feel like they need some extra support around this thing, right? Or did she talk to you about that? Because she's talking to me about this. And I wonder if you could ask her, see what she says to you. Like, it's a touch base.
Yeah, absolutely. We have been married 22 years. We have also done something similar because we didn't do it right for many, many years. And so ours is very similar, but I'll just share for the listeners just a couple nuances that we've added. We meet on Sunday to talk, and it usually, kind of hang out, date, wine, talk. We do the whole week. What we have found is we revisit the weekend on usually that Friday, maybe Thursday night, Friday, because what used to happen is the weekend would come, things kind of change, and then I don't get to go to the gym or something. I'm seeing that she gets to do what she wants, so I get frustrated, or vice versa. So now we usually talk Thursday, Friday, and try to figure out, hey, when do you want to work out? When is this going to happen? Mm-hmm. That's helped us a ton.
Yes. That, and again, everybody I'm working with in Brilliant Balance, we talk about the weekly plan. So again, you need a captain for that plan. I look at a 10-day horizon, so it gets 2 weekends in play. The first time through on that weekend is like preview of coming attractions. And much to your point, by the time you get to the next week, now it's upon you and you can make those revisions because kids make plans throughout the week, right? Or we make plans, like invitations come. And so you do need to revisit that by the time it gets in close, which, you learn through trial and error, just like we did.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier, you like to have, the alone time and so in that, what does that look like from kind of a mindset perspective, your spiritual, spending time in the Word? Do you have something that you're doing every morning to basically kind of equip you for the day so you can lead all these women, so you can help lead the family? What are you doing from a quiet time perspective?
So I think of my early morning as my time to get grounded, like land back on planet Earth, put my feet on the ground and sort of tap in to the divine. right? What is that? And then what that looks like maybe a little bit different from day to day. I can tend to be ritualistic. So later in life, I'm trying to give myself a little more freedom to shift and change it. But I do get up before anybody else. Ideally, that's my goal. Every now and then somebody wakes up early and wrecks my vibe, but that's my goal. I want to be up first. I want to exercise during that time before anyone is up. And I want some time with a devotional. Short. I've learned I cannot do long things in the morning because my brain is racing. So I want something short that brings me focused. Like, for example, Jesus Calling. I love that one. It's so short. It never ceases to amaze me how there's some layer of insight in it. But that would be like, I want something short like that.
And applicable to that day.
Unbelievable. I don't know how she did it. It's like clearly divine.
And it's applicable in your house and my house the same day.
And different years. It just keeps working. I know. Kind of like the Bible. The other thing that I love to do, although I've learned I can't do it first thing in the morning, is writing. So I am never without notebooks. I mean, it's a joke in my household that I sort of wander around the house carrying a stack of notebooks and a pencil and my phone, like everywhere, because I process through writing. So at some point during the day, I need to sit down and just process out things that are, connections that are being made or thoughts that are forming, insights. And so that's a huge piece of my process is quiet and being able to write. And I'm really working on contemplative practices. So I tend to be super high energy. I know to be moving all the time, but this realm of contemplative practices, I would say I'm in an exploring phase of, is it meditation that's going to work best for me, or journaling or prayer, or, walking with a purpose, like mindfulness work. Very intrigued by this, but still kind of finding my way to what is delivering the results that I think are the best.
That's great. Well, Cherylanne, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it and appreciate the help you've given me over the last couple of years we've known each other. What is the best way for listeners to get a hold of you?
Brilliant-balance.com. That's the website. It's kind of the jumping off point to all the places you can find me.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast, Win at Home First. I am so grateful to hear from listeners like you that this content has been helpful. So now I would love for you to pay it forward. I want to get this message in the hands of more listeners. We need leaders to be winning both at home and at work, especially during this time. So please take a minute to share this episode with somebody you think would find value in it, as well as rate and subscribe. As a thank you, please visit my website at corymcarlson.com to download a free resource that people are finding value in. Thank you very much.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.